Hello gamers, this is Kim and Elwood from ThatMomentIn.com. Welcome to Game Warp. Up next, our review of Too Dark. Too Dark is a stealth adventure horror directed by Frederic Reynaud, the godfather of survival horror, who previously gave us Alone in the Dark, now returning with his first indie horror title. Too Dark sees a former detective named Mr. Smith traveling to the town of Gloomywood to solve a mystery involving disappearing children, only to find murder and mayhem along the way. This is a truly unique independent title, independently funded for Hulu on the 21st of November 2014, and then since gone on to have a release as of the start of this month. Opening thoughts, Kim, what did you obviously make of Too Dark?
Well, I think that, in the first impressions as you step into this game, you realize that there is a lot of controls that you need to learn. And the key is to learn these controls because a lot of them will help you into the main part of this is stealthily rescuing children to their destinations. So that's a very key part, is that you need to know all your buttons really well. So you're shushing your kids instead of when they're crying, instead of telling them, come on, you know?
Unquestionably so. I found that this was a game that really benefits if you're playing it through your PC, that it really benefits in you investing in an Xbox controller for this one, because if you're trying to do it through the keyboard and mouse combination, unless you're particularly accustomed to those controls, it can be a bit of a pain, whereas it does lend itself well to a decent controller. As you mentioned already, sound is very much a key part of this game, and from brought back memories in part of the likes of Manhunt, as a large portion of the game you will be finding yourself hiding from enemies and using stealthy kills to dispatch them or lure them into traps, such as on the opening Circus Level, luring them into a pack of rampaging lions, for example. This is a real change up, and the fact that while you do have a gun, you do have very limited ammunition for it, and it kind of only adds to the tension of this game. And it's sort of kind of refreshing in a way to have a survival horror that is really taking it back to its basics, with limited ammunition, real sort of danger and real sort of tension that you have here. And despite its gore cute stylings, this is certainly a unique and interesting title.
I think you bring up a really good point in that it goes back to the roots of survival horror, in the sense that right now, although, you have to manage all your resources. You have flashlights you need to manage because they give the most amount of light in our dark scenario, because it is often too dark, like the title implies. And it takes it makes you really ponder on what your next move is, when to sneak up, when to attack, whether to attack, how to attack. And you need to strategize all these things in order to make sure that you get out of this alive and with all your kids. And there's still, it's just an elevating amount of challenge that you have, because as the game goes on, you seem to have more responsibilities but less resources to work with as the stage goes on, as you near the finale. And a lot of times it's really based on just trial and error.
Unquestionably so. Trial and error is very much the key word of the day when it comes to this game, as the amount of times that you'll find yourself either stumbling into a trap or, more often than not, in my case, a big dark hole. It really is a case of working out the enemy's routes that they take, finding out where those holes are, and really trying to strategize the best route, because there is no particular set way that you can achieve this level. You can go in all guns blazing, you can go in a little more stealthy route. It's completely up to yourself, the sort of path that you take. And these are very immersive worlds that you will find yourself in on the levels. As we mentioned already, we have the opening with the Circus Level, where you're being tormented by a psychotic clown who, when you do finally find him within the realms of this funhouse, he's got the children in little animal costumes, using them as human lions, as he performs his tricks like a demented ringmaster. And while there's obviously this fantastical element, you do have this sense of realism to it, as we obviously have undertones of like a child sex ring that these children are being kidnapped for, and there's some real darkness, and at the same time it walks that fine line between humour and violence, that we obviously open with our lead character here, Mr. Smith, who's cursing away at the fact he can't put up a tent, only to then find his wife decapitated, his children stolen. And it just switches from this highly comedic moment to this really dark moment. And I think this is something that Frederick Reinel has really nailed down in this game. And it creates an experience that I really haven't experienced in quite a while, anything quite similar to this. It's a very unique title, one certainly well worth discovering, especially as an indie title.
I think at the same time, this also brings into the fact that the art styling, as you mentioned, you had briefly talked about before, is really, it's kind of very cutesy and pixelated in a way, but yet when you look at the way they, like, you know, there are some really gory scenes, and you could really, like, if you start hitting someone, you really see them bleeding out, and if you get attacked, you actually see yourself dripping with blood in a kind of pixelated way. And, you know, you can see, like in the first stage, your lions can like just take your kids away or eat them, you know? These are really traumatic scenes for a game that looks, you know, kind of deceives you into thinking it's very cute. But at the same time, you also, like, there's a lot of care into it, and it's just this experience that it is, like you said, very unique. And it really falls into those fantastic, like, indie title sort of areas.
Yeah, I feel that when it comes to the children, they are the real light in this world, because obviously Mr. Smith has seen some particularly dark things, has now become very jaded in his worldview. The people you encounter are obviously very evil and very twisted. And the children are kind of like this innocence and the light of this world. And they will obviously get freaked out by the sight of blood or bodies that you encounter. And again, this only adds to the strategy, because you can't just obviously dispatch a foe anywhere, because you may block a potential path that you have to get the kids past. So if you put a body in the way, they're going to go past it and just run off, which obviously is going to cause you nothing but hassle, seeing as the game is based around you rescuing these children. Despite this darkness and sort of violent nature of this game, it's never to the point where it's disturbing or overly twisted, and perhaps it's because of these gory, cute graphics that we're working with, the fact everything's so pixelated. It sort of lessens the horror slightly. At the same time, this is just such an immersive world, you won't really care once you get into it. The fact that perhaps the graphics aren't as polished, perhaps it does feel like a bit of a retro throwback. There's just so much to immerse yourself in and discover in this world, and it's one that certainly, despite the fact I found myself continuously dying, I still found myself wanting to keep trying, constantly find that way to get through a level or discover that next secret that's hidden within there. And it's just such a fun, immersive world to explore.
I think the immersiveness also lends to the music that they use. It's like this subtle, a little bit, I guess, also brings up the horror, because I felt like the reason why I sometimes felt scared to move, or like I was worried that the next step I took I would die, is the fact that you're not only in a dark world, but the music really elevates the horror that you're in. You know, it kind of gives it a little bit of adventure, but at the same time it brings out those horror elements where maybe part of like what you're doing isn't, well, it is a horrific situation. I mean, these kids are getting abducted. It's a very, very scary situation. But yet, you know, like it kind of makes up for that art, which feels a little bit more childish. I guess it was more of like, how do you say this? More of like a world I was kind of wanting to continue moving forward, but kind of, the dreading feeling, that's what it is.
Yeah, there is a constant feeling of dread, especially as you feel that you're about to get out and you find out, oh, wait a minute, I have to go for another set of guards. I have to get past this next sort of trap, and it's that constant fear that you're going to somehow mess it up. And I think to that extent, it's one of these games where we'd advise that you save often, because if you die, you go back. The only way you can restart is by reloading your last save point. The wonderful save mechanic, of course, being that you smoke. So every time you start to have a smoke, you save your point. And thankfully, there was never a point where it sort of saved and you couldn't recover from it. So you sort of jammed yourself into an area, and then were forced to go back and start the game over, because sadly the game will only allow you to have one save at a time. So if you do for some reason manage to jam yourself in a location that you can't get out of, you're going to be faced with restarting the game from the very beginning. So that would be something certainly for the negative part. The other obviously being with the improvised weapons. While there are obviously things such as clubs, pipes, knives to be picked up, none seem to have the effectiveness of the gun, which unfortunately has the most limited ammunition of any weapon in the game. So you will find yourself, unless you're able to sneak up on your enemies, find yourself in a kind of like a shin kicking contest with enemies, which they will often come out the better of. So again, this is a game like Manhunt. It's encouraging you to sneak, hide those in those shadows, and really time those kills, really, which really only adds to the tension that you're going to be experiencing in this one, because this one, despite its first appearance, is kind of razor sharp, and it's how it cranks up that old tension.
So, well, in since we're kind of running out of time now, the last thing I think we should talk about should be the mechanics of the game. I mean, well, there's a lot to worry about. You know, you mentioned about the weapons being not as effective as the guns. And the last part probably would be talking about maybe stealth elements, or maybe the trial and error. I don't know, like, what did you think of them?
The stealth elements I certainly found were easy enough to pick up. It wasn't a case of that you're having to hold down numerous buttons to do the stealth. It is really just based around the amount of pressure that you're putting on your forward stick. So again, if you're using a controller, it's a lot easier to sneak than if you're perhaps using the keyboard. I really enjoyed the stealth mechanics, although a lot of the time I found myself still being discovered, because a lot of the time the enemies will be carrying torches and they will find you, but at least you get to see the line of sight of your enemy, so it's not the case that they can miraculously see you in any situation. You do get a little bit of guidance of how far the enemy can see, and you can obviously adjust as needed. But as yourself, Kim, how did you find the stealth mechanics?
I thought it was pretty good, especially because you could also choose the option. I think it was very important that they also had the idea that you could tiptoe, and then you can have like a quick access to save, and you can have, like, there was a lot of while it seemed at first to be very overwhelming, because you had to, like, there were like 3 types of attacks that you had to figure out, and then there was like 3 types of, like, you had to manage your light, you had to manage your weapon, and it seemed like it was a lot. But I think that as you start jumping into the game further, you start realizing all these things become very natural to you. I guess it really immerses you into becoming that protector. You want to be that protective parent or that protective adult that will save these kids. You're never powerful. You'll never feel like powerful in this situation, because you're always lacking all these resources. Yeah. But you will always feel the need to want to keep, stopping these deranged psychopaths.
Well, definitely. So I think the major issue I have with this game is purely just when it comes to the mechanics, in the fact that you can only hold one item in your hand at one time. So you have a choice of either holding a key, which if you open a door is not the fact that it's in your inventory, you actually have to have in your hand to use it, which of course is real pain when you're trying to quickly avoid enemies and use a key at the same time, and that quick juggling between items. The inventory selection certainly could have done with some work.
I think that's where the problem mostly lies for me, is in these little bits that, these little parts. Like, say, if you used your keyboard, clicking through the inventory was easier. But then I also had that issue where when I first started this game, I don't know if it was a bug or if it was something that went wrong, my controller kept switching to my keyboard, and then I would have to activate my keyboard to switch back to my controller, and it drove me crazy. It was crazy, but then the next day when I played it again and I started it up, everything was fine again. The controller worked perfectly and flawlessly, and I think it's just like little things like this which kind of makes the experience go away a little. It's these maybe little polishes that they need to make, but I mean, the game is just released, so I can still see them working to make sure that all these things are going to run smoothly.
Final scores. What do you rate this one, Kim?
I would give this one a solid 4 out of 5.
I agree with you, Kim. This is a solid independent horror title, and I like yourself, I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5.
To get more game reviews, head over to thatmomentin.com. To get gaming news every single day, like us on Facebook at Game Warp Podcast.